Ya, baik. Selamat malam, Bapak Ibu sekalian. Selamat datang di webinar ya yang diselenggarakan oleh Ubermen's Project. Tema kita malam hari ini terambil dari buku karya Profesor Kevin Schilbrack, The Manifesto of Philosophy and the Study of Religions. Perkenalkan terlebih dahulu, saya Jessica Layantara yang akan bertugas sebagai moderator kita pada malam hari ini. Sebelum kita masuk dalam acara, izinkan saya membacakan susunan acara kita malam hari ini. Jadi acara kita akan berlangsung sekitar 100 menit dan akan terbagi menjadi beberapa sesi. Yang pertama adalah paparan dari Profesor Kevin Schilbrack, dan juga setelah itu kita akan mendengarkan respons dari Dr. Rodinal, dan kemudian kita akan masuk dalam dialog interaktif antara kedua narasumber, dan kita juga akan masuk dalam sesi Q&A dengan peserta. Dan terakhir kita akan mendengarkan penutup ya atau closing remarks dari kedua narasumber dan juga dari moderator. So we are fortunate to have two distinguished speakers today. Hari ini kita beruntung ya menghadirkan dua narasumber. Sebelum kita mulai, saya juga akan memperkenalkan narasumber kita pada malam hari ini. The first one is Professor Kevin Schilbrack. Beliau adalah Profesor Filsafat Agama di Appalachian State University, lulusan University of Chicago Divinity School. Beliau juga adalah penulis buku yang akan kita bahas malam hari ini, Philosophy and the Study of Religions, a Manifesto, yang tentu saja juga menjadi salah satu rujukan penting dalam filsafat agama kontemporer. Narasumber kedua kita adalah Dr. M. Rodinal Khair Khasri. Beliau adalah dosen filsafat di Universitas Gadjah Mada yang juga meneliti tentang filsafat agama, khususnya tentang bagaimana agama ada dan beroperasi di tingkat sosial. Baik, teman-teman, untuk memulai, mari kita dengarkan paparan dari Profesor Kevin Schilbrack. Professor Schilbrack, first of all, I would like to thank you for being here with us today. So for our first session, we kindly invite you to present your material for approximately 20 minutes. And after that, Dr. Rodinal will offer his response. Professor, the floor is yours.
Oh, that's perfect. Thank you, Ms. Layantara. What a privilege it is to be here and to see the number of participants jumping up higher and higher. And I'm grateful to be invited to discuss philosophy of religion with so many interested people. This is the cover of my book. I like this dark red color, although I didn't pick the picture. And the book has a subtitle of A Manifesto. And this means that the book is meant as a kind of road sign pointing to what I hope is the future of philosophy of religion. The book is a statement for a possible new path. I remember when I was writing the book that I used to go home from teaching and eat dinner and then drive back to my university once it was quiet and dark and just work alone in the office. And when I sent the book to the publisher, I had no idea whether anyone would be interested in the ideas of the book. So I have been very happy to see that the book has become a kind of reference point for many people who agree with the path that I am describing. That is to say, people who want to expand philosophy of religion. I can summarize this new path very quickly. Traditionally, philosophy of religion as an academic field focused on questions about God, questions such as these. On the one hand, is the existence of the universe in general and the existence of all the complicated parts of the universe, such as the eyeball or my lungs or other organs in a person's body, or is that evidence for an intelligent designer? And some people argued yes, and some people argued no. And on the other hand, philosophers might argue from the problem of evil, and they would say, is the amount of suffering in the world evidence that there is not a loving and all-powerful being watching over the world? And again, some philosophers would answer yes, and some would answer no. So these are questions about whether it's rational to believe in God. But as I see it, this is not really an example of philosophy of religion, in quotes. This is really a philosophy of God, or maybe it's a philosophy of theism, the belief in God. A philosophy of religion, if we were to do justice to that phrase, to the name of the discipline, it would include philosophy of God, it would include philosophy of theism, but it would also include other religious beliefs that may or may not be connected to God. Questions about enlightenment, questions about reincarnation, questions about the Tao or the Logos or other ultimate realities that do not have a mind and do not watch over the earth. Questions about Brahman in Hinduism, questions about the ancestors who continue to appear after their death. All of these are supernatural realities that are not clearly connected to the belief in God, and they got very little, almost no attention from philosophers of religion. Nevertheless, for most religious people, the most important thing is not philosophical argument, but how they live their religion. And so I think in addition to expanding philosophy of religion to include these other realities, it would also include in its object of study, not just do you believe in God, or do you believe in nirvana, or do you believe in reincarnation, but it would also include the philosophical study of religious practices, the philosophical study of pilgrimage, of fasting, of initiation rituals like baptism, the philosophical study of prayer and meditation, and so on. I think I have a minute just to give one fast example, which I hope is as funny to you as it is to me. I can remember when I first started studying philosophy of religion in my university, and I was so excited when I read about proofs for the existence of God. And I went home to see my family, and I told my mother, who went to church every Sunday, I said, "Did you know that philosophers have developed proofs for the existence of God?" And she said, "That's nice." And she had no interest in it at all. And so that's one example of what I mean when I say I would like philosophy of religion to grow and expand, to study the way that people live their religion, and not only the texts written by philosophers who have the time and the education to write arguments for and against the existence of God. However, I don't think that expanding philosophy of religion in the way that I'm describing with you today is simply a matter of including more religions that had not been previously included. I think that expanding philosophy of religion in this way that I'm describing, it raises new questions that philosophers have not really given much attention to. These questions connect philosophy and the study of religion to sociology and the study of religion, anthropology and the study of religion, psychology of religion, comparative studies of religion, history of religion. It connects philosophy to all the other disciplines that are interested, all the other scholars in the university interested in religious ways of living all around the world. So that's what my book is about. It raises a series of what I consider to be new questions that have not been given a lot of attention. And I want to give you some examples of the philosophical questions that I raise in my book. In my book, I also answer these questions, and I make a series of proposals for what I think is the best path forward. But I'm not going to talk about my proposals unless that comes up in the questions and answers. And that's because I think that the most important thing is to identify good questions, not to insist on, please agree with me because I'm so smart, but to identify good questions that can lead forward to build those bridges and make those connections to how do philosophers study all these different ways of life around the world, and how do they create conversations with the other academic disciplines in the university. So in the time I have now, I wanted to give a couple of examples of the questions that I raise in my book as a kind of introduction to what the book is about. One of the questions that I consider has to do with philosophers' focus on religious beliefs. Christian communities, they worked very hard to develop and then write down the doctrines that state their intellectual commitments best. An example of this would be the doctrine of the Trinity. And these Christian communities also developed creeds or statements of belief that their members would recite publicly together as a group. Given the development of doctrines like these and creeds like these, we can say that it was important to Christian communities that their members believe the right things. And this is what the word orthodoxy means, correct belief. Today, many people will say that the very definition of religion is a system of beliefs. However, Christianity is actually unusual in their development of doctrines, unusual in their development of creeds. Other religious communities didn't have this emphasis on making sure that the members of their group believed in their minds that what was orthodox, what was considered to be the correct belief. But this raises a question, and I said I wanted to give examples of the questions I raise in my book. And here's the question. If philosophy of religion is going to expand to include the study of all the different kinds of religion in human history, all the different kinds of religion in different cultures around the world, should they continue to focus on belief if it's really primarily Christians who've written down creeds and developed doctrines? What if the religious community never developed any explicit doctrines? They didn't write them down. They don't have any creeds that everyone recites. I mean, as this group in the audience knows, there's plenty of religious communities in human history and around the world who don't have writing. They don't have books at all, let alone theological books that state their beliefs. So, should philosophers of religion continue to focus on belief? The question is this: is it necessary for religious people to have religious beliefs? That's the title of one of the chapters of my book. Can a person be a religious person without religious beliefs? What is the relationship between the actions that they do and what they believe in their heart? That's a question that most philosophers of religion have not studied. And that's one of the questions in the book. So here's a second question from the book. You can see that my idea of an expanded philosophy of religion involves reflection on the relationship between beliefs and actions, the relationship between the mind and the body. In this respect, an expanded philosophy of religion is in line with the focus on the body that grew in 20th century philosophy. Sometimes it was what I call the body as an object in post-structuralist philosophy like Michel Foucault. What does the body say? How can I read the body? That was his interest. You can see he's outside and he's looking at someone. He's saying that person is a soldier. That person is a prisoner. That person is an adult or a child, and so on. I call that the body as an object. Also in the 20th century, there was a movement in phenomenology, and perhaps the most famous example is the French philosopher Merleau-Ponty, who developed what I call the body as a subject. Here, the question is not, is the body a text that I can read by looking at how they hold themselves? The question is, well, what do you learn when you walk around or run around or you fall down in your body? What do you learn about yourself and about the world? So those philosophers focused on the body, but that has had relatively little effect on philosophy of religion so far. And I'm curious how to include embodied social practices in philosophy of religion. I think there's been a kind of mind-body dualism in the study of religions. Philosophers study the mind and the beliefs and the doctrines and the creeds, and anthropologists perhaps study the rituals and what people do with their body. And it's very rare to find philosophers interested in rituals, philosophers interested in liturgies, philosophers interested in prayer and meditation. But if philosophers expand their focus from the question whether it's rational or not rational for people to believe in God, and they include the wide variety of practices that religious people do, the ceremonies and pilgrimages and baptisms and worship, what would be the philosophical aspect of those religious practices? That's the focus of one of my chapters. Are the practices expressions of belief, so the people already have their beliefs and the beliefs come out through their practices? If that's true, then their beliefs must not come from their practices. They must come from somewhere else. But perhaps the religious practices are actually the locations where people explore and learn and develop their beliefs. Maybe practices are forms of inquiry. This question that I'm putting on the table with you today connects philosophy of religion to philosophy of mind and to a movement in cognitive science called embodied cognition. How do people learn how to navigate their world without words, without discourse, just by actually doing the activity? That's a second question. Here's a third question. And I wonder whether the people in this audience, maybe this will come up in the questions and answers. Have you ever seen a television show, and perhaps it's a talk show or a news show or a game show, and at the end of the show, the camera pulls backwards, and then you can see not just the original scene, but you can see other cameras. And you can see maybe a teleprompter that has the words on it, or you can see the director of the show standing on the side. When this happens, you get reminded that what you had been watching before is a construction and it's an entertainment. And I think we can do something like that in philosophy of religion. Sometimes this is called the reflexive turn. So instead of using your concepts to understand people and things out there in the world, you turn around and you consider your own conceptual framework. Where did your ideas come from? Who invented them? Are they the concepts that you want? There's a group of scholars today who have asked these questions specifically about the concept of religion. They call themselves the critical study of religion. The idea, this is the conclusions of some of their investigations. The idea that a religion, the phrase, the word, the concept, religion, refers to one or two of the many forms of life around the world, like Buddhism, like Islam, like Shinto. This is not what the word religion always meant. A couple centuries ago, it meant something else. And a few centuries before that, it had a different meaning. The meaning of the word has evolved over time. It's also true that the word religion, to say that aspect of a culture or that form of life, like Buddhism and Islam and Shinto, that's not a way that people have divided their lives in other cultures. Not every language has a word for religion. The Bible doesn't have a word for religion. There's a lot of debate about whether the Quran has a word for religion. But if the word religion is a modern concept and a European concept, a Latin concept, comes from the word religio with no N on the end, and it's not found in ancient Egypt or Japan or China and so on, why would we continue to use it? Or should we continue to use it? Should we impose this concept on cultures that do not see themselves this way? The question from the critical study of religion movement is the concept of religion a form of Western imperialism, imposing a Western concept on the rest of the world where the concept doesn't exist? My question is this: can religion exist among people who don't have that concept? Could the reality be there even if they don't have the concept? This is an interesting question in ontology, or the nature of existence, a subfield called social ontology. Can you have a form of life if you don't have the concept of the form of life? So that's another question that's in my book. I think the chapter is called Do Religions Exist? It's not good that I don't remember the title, isn't it? Right, Do Religions Exist? Okay, one more example, and then maybe two, depending on my time. Here's another question in my book. Scholars do not, if they say we want to study religion, they don't all agree on how they define religion. I think this is the dirty secret of religious studies. They disagree about how to define the central term in our field. Some of them say something like this: a religion is a form of life that's based on belief in some supernatural reality. Maybe it's Allah, maybe it's the Tao, maybe it's Amida Buddha, maybe it's the Christian Trinity. It's got to have some supernatural reality like this. And if it has that, then if the person believes in that, they have a religion. This is sometimes called a substantive definition of religion. It's got this essence or this substance, belief in the supernatural. But here's a funny implication of that definition. What if the person who believes in God, for example, actually does not practice anything? They don't feel anything. They don't have any experiences. If you ask them, if we put a microphone to them and we say, do you believe in God? They say, I guess so. I guess the universe had to come from somewhere, but they don't read any scripture. They're not part of any community. Do they have a religion? According to the substantive definition, they do, because they believe in a supernatural reality, but that's all they have. That seems like an awkward implication of the definition. So here's a different definition of religion. Some people say religion has to be something you live. It has to function in your life in a particular way. Maybe it brings your community together. Maybe it gives the individual a sense of purpose and meaning. And she gets up in the morning and she says, this is how I should live my life. Or maybe it organizes your life in terms of what you love the most. These are sometimes called a functional definition of religion, not a substantive definition of religion. But here's an implication of the functional definition. What if that person gets their orientation? They get up in the morning, they're motivated, it brings their community together, but what brings them together is not a supernatural reality. It's just something like money. The person loves money and they want to make money every day, and they think about it all the time, and they judge their value in terms of how much money they have. That would become their religion. Money would be their God. And so if you have a functional definition of religion, it seems that every human being is religious. Everyone has a religion, and there's no such thing as a non-believer. Everyone has something that gets them out of bed in the morning. And that's kind of an awkward definition of religion. It would also mean that if you were to study a mosque or a synagogue or a church or the Ummah in Buddhism, maybe none of those people are Muslims or Christians or Jews or Buddhists. They just love money, or maybe they love a soccer team, a football team. They could, whatever gets them up in the morning is their real religion. It'd be very hard to ever know what anyone's religion was until you interviewed them and talked to them and found out what they love most. So this is a question about how definitions work. I have one more element in my book, but I don't want to take up too much of the time, so I'm going to skip over it, and maybe it will come up in the conversation, and I'm going to jump to my concluding paragraph. Some people see the study of philosophy, not just philosophy of religion, but philosophy in general, as learning what the great thinkers of the past said. What did Aristotle say? What did Descartes say? What did Heidegger say? What did they say about God or reality or the mind or virtue? Obviously, philosophy will include what the philosopher said, but I see it as so much more than that. I see people today faced with terrible problems, and these problems always involve questions about what do you know and what are you not sure about? What's just your opinion, and what is true? They also involve questions about what is real and what is just your hope or your fantasy. They involve questions about what is moral and what's the right thing to do, and not just perhaps what your parents say. What is justice? What do people deserve? And not simply what's the way that your society is structured right now. These questions about truth, reality, morality, and justice, those are the philosophical questions of philosophers of the past, but philosophers of the past didn't answer them, or they haven't settled them, and they're not memorizing what people said in the past is not enough to practice philosophy today. Philosophers today need help with those problems. So I see philosophy of religion, the kind of work that I'm doing and you let me talk about today, as a request to you for help with these problems, to engage in philosophy and to think about it as helping you live your best life now, and not simply memorizing what people said in the past. So I wanted to thank you again for giving me this opportunity to talk about my work. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you for your presentation, Professor Schilbrack. So I recently read your book and articles, and I believe your ideas resonate deeply with the context in Indonesia. I think there are many ideas about religion here in Indonesia that need to be, like deconstructed, as they are too dependent on Western concept of religion. Okay, so next we will hear a response from Dr. Rodinal who will share his perspective from the Indonesian context of philosophy of religion. So, Dr. Rodinal, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Jessica, and thank you, Kevin. Very, very interesting and faithful remarks on your books. Yeah, I have read your books. Yeah, since 2 years, I think. Yeah, I found it from my colleague's work, his thesis. Now he's in Sydney University to finish his PhD, and he has a lot of things to do with your works. Yeah, I think he helped me, find you out, and okay, I use your works in my entire teachings here currently, same as Fahri, as he did, yeah. And as Jessica mentions before, yeah, in Indonesia we have so many interesting things to do, yeah, to deconstruct, for example, to read questions, yeah. In Indonesia, we have 5 principles to run this country, Mr. Kevin. Yeah, it's called Pancasila, the official ideology that endorsed and legalized by Indonesian founding fathers. Yeah, on it was in 1945. Yeah, the Congress, I think. Yeah, they promote and they commit to the first principle, namely believing in one God, ketuhanan yang Maha Esa in bahasa in Indonesian language. Yeah, it means that everyone in Indonesia has to believe in one God. I think the redactional and textually, it contains a lot of problem. Yeah, because it is dominated by the Abrahamic religions, POV, yeah, to promote monotheisms. And okay, we have directly asked a question: how can those very, very official principles cover all kind of religious preference in Indonesia, especially in global south? Yeah, as you promote in your book, yeah. Okay, I think the unjustly the way they run this country by promoting this problematic principle, yeah, uh, insist or triggering me, sorry, yeah, to re-questioning how Indonesian people positing God in their daily lives, yeah. Okay, it was my first point, yeah, to comment your work, but I have several another list, yeah, regarding your book. The first one, I I read your books, your philosophy and the study of religions, your manifesto, and one of the very, very important article of yours, religions, are there any? I think I use your articles for my doctoral thesis, yeah, for my dissertations. I come from Menongian stance, yeah. It means that I promote the substantiality of reality to bridge, yeah, the tensions between realism and anti-realism, to posit, okay, religions, are there any? How can we posit that religions really exist? Yeah, we know that when we say religions, we refer to something different from concrete things. I think, yeah, it comes from another things, yeah, extraordinary things, yeah, that according to Meinong, it's called so-sign or quasi-sign being, yeah, some entities that beinglessness object in some sense. Okay, I start from the divided ontologically between realism and anti-realism. Yeah, you start from this very, very interesting and very, very important debate between realism and anti-realism. Yeah, the study of religion generally divided into 2 major streams, including philosophy of religion, sociology of religion, anthropology of religion, psychology of religions, and so forth. In anti-realist pole, there is no such thing as religion, or there are no religions at all. Yeah, because religions merely posit as or are treated as constructed object or social constructed objects. Yeah, nothing's come from the essential path or essential source of religions, because every religions lacked the essential feature. because everything is constructed from the social. Yeah. Religion is formed, constructed, invented, and imagined, but without any correspondence to the objective reality. But weirdly, yeah, we can find one of the philosophy of religions named Don Cupid. Yeah, he promote anti-realist religious anti-realist. Sorry, but how can we deploy, or how can we add the way anti-realist thinking about world to the theistic or the religious mechanism? I think it is weird, but we have to emphasize, yeah, because there are a lot of paths in discovering or in discussing religions, not only from the theistic centric way of thinking, I think. And then the pull of metaphysical realisms, yeah, simply put, religion exists independently of the concept that describe it. So whatever we say about religions, whatever we construct the definitions, yeah, it belongs to our mind and consciousness. It doesn't refer to the reality or the divine reality itself, because nothing to do with the reality of God, because it was inaccessible, and it belongs to real object, as Graham Harman said on quadruple object. Yeah. And I believe, Kevin, that all believers have ontological commitment on God, regardless their epistemic attitude toward God. Why I said that? Because when I declare myself as theist, it means that I have to maintain my ontological commitment that God really, really exists independently from my mind and my consciousness. But once I try to describe or to articulate God into my humane spoken sense, yeah, I must obey the structure of linguistic itself. Okay, I think it close to linguistic determinations that has been also accused to Martin Heidegger, but okay, Heideggerian should resist that, yeah. But I see how the construction of linguists shaped our thinking on God. Okay, we are arrived in how Kevin proposed the middle path to to the to the conflict between realism and anti-realism. The first, Kevin tried to develop a more nuanced view of the concept of religion, namely through critical realism. He borrowed this concept from Roy Bhaskar, critical realism. First, he tried to distinguishing between the real world and the observable world. You can find it in the chapter that discuss about the ontological things on religion, and also how impositing the God in the previous traditional philosophy of religion. Yeah, quoting Bhaskar, yeah, I quote this directly from Kevin's book. According to Bhaskar, our intellectual relationship to the world, including the theory of religion, are socially mediated, but not socially determined. I think this is the point, yeah, that we can learn from Bhaskar, that everything we propose or everything we articulate on religion are socially constructed, but it doesn't mean that we refer to something like what fictionalists did. Yeah. I repeat again, it doesn't equal or it doesn't mean that to posit religion as a socially constructed things doesn't mean that or doesn't equal to the way fictionalists treating religions. I think Kevin's come from the point of view or the foundational milestone that every theist has to be realist. I think it was my elaboration, and you can comment on it, Kevin. Yeah, but I believe that every theist hold realist belief, but it is ontologically, but not epistemologically. Okay, we are supposed, or we can be anti-realist, but epistemologically spoken. Yeah. And the next one I got from Kevin's work. Our notion about religion epistemologically is socially mediated, shaped by our culture, language, history, and ideology. But how we understand religion and how every community with their particular consciousness to define religion, to define supernatural being, not determined by social itself. Yeah, it is only mediated through the sociality. We can learn about the religious teachings, yeah, uh, primordially or throughout the history from the social engagement. It linked to what Kevin has mentioned in the book, that is dispositionalism. How we understand religion, how religions work in sociality, it close to this positionalist mechanism. This positional mechanism is the way we can learn, the way we learn religions, and or the way some kind of religious teachings being inherited from the previous generation to our generation through social engagement. Especially when we say that in epistemological mechanism, we got the teachings from the testimonial of another person or another authoritative person. Okay, but the fact which refer by our comprehension is not socially determined. I think this is close to realism sense, because religion is not purely a human invention. There is still some underlying real dimension that exists beyond cultural description. Okay, I think Kevin has a lot things to do with emphasizing his point of view to the cultural context. Yeah, it links to what Gadamer said that okay, Wirkungsgeschichte, yeah, we are situated by the culture formation, by the historical presuppositions of the way we understanding the world. Yeah. Okay. There are also the mainstream criticism of religions, yeah, found on the book. The first level critic, the notion that concept of religion is essentially a social construct things. It refers to constructivism. It didn't constitute an innate or devolved condition of human existence, but rather emerged historically as a later development. I think religion is merely a social constructed things developed in a certain time and place in history. And it is developed for the purpose of those who needed that conceptual tools. Yeah. It means that to say religions really exist, it close to the notion that to be religious equal to declare ourselves to be possessed by the functionality of religions. We say that religion exists because it has a functional dimension in social. Yeah, as Evan Pritchard said, that religions are the motivations of social movement, and I think I believe that. Yeah, regardless the bunch critics from New Atheism, for example, the functional aspect or dimension of religions still remains, because everyone who possesses belief they hold their belief not only for the sake to maintain the belief itself. I think they have another purpose. For example, for the well-beingness, for example, yeah, and so on and so forth. Yeah. And this first level critics said that religion as a tool in order to accomplish certain goal, no essence at all. It means that religion doesn't have uh, essential properties that need to be maintained throughout the history, throughout the time. And the second problem, or the second critics, the problem of institutionalizing God. I think we have to borrow the notion from Fideism, for example, yeah, that they believe that between our rationality and the faith itself can be bound. Okay, we can't make a bridge between our ratio and the faith because they conflicting each other. Okay, once God became institutionalized, truth claims began to emerge, along with the separation between the religious and non-religious aspect of culture. I think this is the beginning of the chaos because each community, they have their own conception on God, and they treat their belief as the only path to God. Yeah, they believe that all the conception represent God itself. I think it was the problem. And religion was shaped according to the particular ideological motivation, for example, missionary, and thus religion is inherently political and will always remain political. And once I, I found some jargon from internet that okay, religions come from the sky to the earth just to resolve or to overcome the problem that inherited from the religious itself. I think very very paradoxical, yeah, that religions come to overcome the problem that they created. Okay, and the next critics, religion distort the surrounding culture. I think, okay, we face a lot of different kind of religions, especially in Indonesia. We have a lot of particular religions. I call it indigenous religions of Indonesians that doesn't covered by the ideological principle of the nations. As I mentioned before, ketuhanan yang Maha Esa, everyone in Indonesia has to believe in one God. It is very, very monotheistic propaganda, for example, yeah. But we have to promote, yeah, to make sure that everyone in particular aspect or particular scope can convey their self, yeah, and can find the terms that they can match with their belief to avoid the epistemic injustice, especially hermeneutical and testimonial injustice. And then this is the Kevin's proposal. The first one, he promote the ontological turn, yeah, to triggering us, to eager us to move from the traditional debate on God to the contemporary philosophy of religions that indicated by the way we extend our objects of the study of religion or the study of philosophy of religions. It means that given acknowledge that the terms religion is a socially constructed things, yeah, but it is often employed for problematic purposes. Nevertheless, one should not adopt an attitude of hostility toward the terms religions or toward religion itself, because religions remains real as a social kind. It is the only form accessible to our perception and debate. However, this doesn't entail a denial of the existence of a supernatural world. This position is close aligned with what's so-called in my stance, yeah, the Menongianism camp plus the object-oriented ontological camp that posit to treat God or to treat the supernatural being, we have to be realist, yeah, but ontologically. But in some sense, we have to build conceptions about what we refer to as a supernatural being. It means that we have to obey the linguistic structure that must, for us, for the sake of the understanding, for the sake of constructing the common understanding on what our notions has to be. Okay, and how I respond to the inaccessible object, ontologically, beliefs may be positioned as inner, private, and inaccessible. But however, according to Kevin, beliefs are not only expressed, but are also closely and intricately involved in our public life. I think it indicates that religion has a functional feature that maintains the existence of religion itself, yeah, in the middle of the social community. And this is my proposal. The first, we have to reconstruct the category of divine object in the realist and anti-realist tensions, because when we have belief, we don't have to give it justifications necessarily and immediately, because once I possess the commitment that God exists, it doesn't mean that all of my conception on God should be referred or represents the God realm or the reality of God, because I produce the semantic things that depend on my historical experience. Yeah, it's shaped by my social background, my educational background, and so on. Because education, culture, and my religious or cultural background are the preposition of my conception on God. Yeah, I think it was my stance that the ontologically, every taste has to be realist, including Gnostic and agnostic taste. Yeah, but in epistemologically, we can be anti-realist. Why? Because all of our conception on God can't be referred directly to the God itself. Okay, I think that was my comments to Kevin's, and after this, I have several questions. The first, if you want the object of the study of religion, Kevin, to be more toward accessible data, what exactly do you mean by accessible? I think we have a spectrum between abstract object to the concrete object. So if you tend to posit religious objects or the object of a study of religions to be more accessible, will it belongs to the concrete scope only, or it can involve the abstract things that always reproduce from the community of religion itself? I think that's all from me. Back to the moderator. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Rodinal, for your presentation. I think your perspective offers a refreshing approach in combining or maybe modifying critical realism with Menongianism and object-oriented ontology, particularly in emphasizing ontological commitment in religion. So now we will move on to the interactive dialogue, where I will guide a few questions to enrich the discussion. So the first question I want to ask Professor Schilbrack, and you can also answer Dr. Rodinal's question. So Professor Schilbrack, what is your opinion on Dr. Rodinal's proposal which may align with your own views on critical realism in understanding religion. Yeah, you can agree or disagree with Dr. Rodinal. Please, Professor.
Thanks. That's a helpful introduction, Dr. Rodi, to your Mainongian theism, which is really a groundbreaking position. I think it's not widely held, and I like it when philosophers act the way that you have acted, and you say, I want to say something that's different and original and try it out. So I would like to, in the time we have, if we can do this, figure out where you and I would agree and perhaps not agree. I think one place that we agree that you talked about in your presentation is that scholars in the university can study religions, and they can study religions in their diversity, the kind that you described in Indonesia, without offending religious people or supporting religious people. I think the academic study of religion, there was many people who said, really, to understand religion, you have to be religious yourself, or to understand belief in God, you have to believe in God yourself. And I also know plenty of scholars who say the opposite. And they say, if you're going to be a scholar of religion, you should not believe in God, and you should not believe in the supernatural, and you have to have a commitment to naturalism. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you and I are agreeing that we can set the question about the supernatural aside and talk about religions as historical realities that are shaping people's lives. And you could do that if you yourself are a religious person. You could still say, but this is how religion operates or functions, or how it changed. And you could do that if you're not a religious person. You can, the questions are in my mind, I'm imagining they're like perpendicular to each other. One is a question about the supernatural, and the other is a question about human culture. So I think that you and I agree about that part. You also described my position in a way that I liked, that sounded accurate, where you said, well, then religion would be socially constructed by people acting in history, making a million or a billion little decisions every day as they interact with each other. They will form a religion, but it's not a fiction. This is not a fictional approach to religion. That's exactly my view. I think I hear people say sometimes that religion is just imaginary, that religion is fictional, or that we should treat it as if it's a real thing, even though it's not a real thing. And I think the problem with that approach, the fictionalist approach, is that it treats empiricism or science as if it's the only way that we know what's real. And so they want to say apples are real and dogs are real and physical objects that we can look at are real. But a family is a construction or a fiction. A religion, money is all as if it's real. And that's not my view. I think this is not in my book, but it's in response to what you said today. I think when you take two elements together and you combine them, sometimes new properties emerge that were not in element one or in element two. I mean, this is widespread in reality. If you take hydrogen and oxygen and you combine it as H2O, you take these two gases and you create a liquid that you can breathe and you can put fires out. If you take that molecule, it has new properties that were not in the atoms. If you take that molecule and you combine it with other molecules, you can get a living cell, like a one-celled animal that swims in the water, and it hunts for food, and it can reproduce and make baby creatures. The water can't do that. So now you have organic properties, living properties in the world that didn't exist before. You can take cells and combine them into an organ like my heart, and it pumps blood. The cells can't do that, only the organ as a whole. So at every level, as we go up from subatomic particles to atoms to molecules to cells to organs. You get new properties, new properties, new properties, because the world that we live in is stratified into levels with increasing complexity until you get a bunch of organs together into a person. And then that person can study philosophy or get married or think about what they want for dinner. And their heart can't do that. A one-celled creature can't do that. Water can't do that. Atoms can't do that. You get all kinds of new properties when you get persons. And now if we agree that persons are incredibly complex organisms on Earth with properties that are not found in outside of persons, you can combine persons into groups. 2 people can get married. 5 people can make a basketball team. 1,000 people can make a faculty of a university. 1,000,000 people can make a nation. When the people come together, they get new properties, and they're not fictional properties. They are real properties in the world. So they are socially constructed, but not fictions. I think if you said to someone, I'm married to my partner, and they said, oh, that's a fiction, you're acting as if there really is a relationship between those 2 people. If you said the team, it has a winning record and we hope they win the championship, and someone said, oh, you're acting as if they have a winning record, as if they that seems like a very bad analysis. Teams and nations and marriages and religions, they are real things in the world, even though they are not visible things like an apple or a dog. So I'm wondering if that connects to your view. I think it's similar, but I don't know if I would say ontologically it's real and epistemologically it's not real. Is that helpful, Brody?
Okay, thank you, Kevin. I have to clarify what I mean by
Thank you.
epistemologically anti-realist. Yeah,
Yeah.
uh, all kind of conception on God, yeah, belongs to my mind and my consciousness. Okay, I think it was derived properties from my mind. Yeah, as I borrow from Menongianism that we have constructive properties. For example, when I refer to a unicorn, when I refer to a round square and so forth, yeah, uh,
Mhm.
that is the intentional object. Yeah. Why? Because we have the directedness toward the object, and I refer to the property, the squareness, the roundness, and so forth. And each of the property can engage or connect to the property in the concrete reality that I encounter in my daily life. Yeah. For example, I have the things, the stuff in my rooms have the roundness properties and so on. Yeah. But what if we talk about God or the abstract things? Yeah,
Yeah.
is it okay if I said that okay, God isn't fictional, but God's as I posit God as the same object as the unicorn or the round square. I think
Mm,
many of these can resist me because okay, they have to put God beyond everything that we encounter in our daily life. Yeah, but
mhm,
I have another question to you, Kevin. How can you
mhm.
ensure, yeah, that when you face some kind of accusations, that your extensions on the objects of study of religions, yeah, you have to include uh, the concrete things, yeah. So
Mhm.
you are close to the naturalist camp, yeah.
Yes.
Only individual things exist. It refers to reisms. I think it is borrowed from Franz Brentano, yeah, uh, from the Austrian object school, yeah, that everything's has to be concrete and only individual things exist. How if you are being accused as a fictionalist because okay, you put aside the supernatural being and you just okay focus, you emphasize more on the concrete things. Is it okay if you being accused that you are fictionalist or you promote or you endorse naturalist point of view, for example? I think that is my question. Thank you, Kevin.
Can I just say again how happy I am to be in your group today and to be participating in this conversation? Um, You know, I think a lot of professors, and especially in philosophy, we walk around and we tell people our ideas, and no one else is that interested in them, or they don't understand them. So it's nice to have someone like you to push me and to ask critical questions like this. Um, if I can go back to my example of two people coming together to make a relationship like a marriage or a team or a jury or a university or a religion, you're absolutely right that I guess we would say I'm a naturalist, and I don't think, can I do this with my fingers? If I have my two people down here, I don't think, and they both have powers. They are both agents. They both do things in the world, the husband and the wife, or whatever the relationship is. They go shopping and they raise their children. They do all kinds of things. The marriage is a higher level. That's their relationship. And I don't think that the marriage does things. It doesn't have agency like a person does. And we talk as if it does. We'll say something like this: when the wife was out of town, the marriage kept the husband from cheating, or something like that, as if the marriage has power. But really, it's because the husband honored his promise that he didn't cheat. And so it's really, the marriage doesn't have, they sometimes call it downward causation on the people in the group. I don't talk that way. You're right that I say the husband has agency and the wife has agency, and they're in a marriage that constrains them and empowers them to do things. Here's a perfect example of this, I think. I was hired as a department chair at my university, and I found someone who was not preparing for his classes. He would just walk into class and read the newspaper to the students. And I didn't like the way he was teaching his classes. And so I did not renew his contract for the following year. In effect, I fired somebody. Where did I get the power to fire that person? It's not because I'm Kevin, and it's not because I'm cruel. It's because I was the department chair, and it was my place in the relationship or the institution of the university that gave me the power to not sign his contract, and so that he was no longer at the university. So I think the university is a real thing. It's not a fictional thing, but it doesn't do anything. It's the people in the university, the students and the teachers, or it's the people in the marriage, it's the husband and the wife, or it's the people on the basketball team. They do things, but they get extra powers or extra constraints by the group that they are in. So this is a sophisticated question, and I'm not sure how it lines up with your Meinongian approach, because I probably would not say that a university or a religion or a marriage is like a unicorn or a round square. It's different in certain ways because it has real powers.
Okay, I'm interested in the way you mention real power. Yeah,
Yeah,
I think I'm not tend to posit or to treat religions or God as the same things as unicorn and round square, but
good.
emphasize on the way the the bunch of object interact each other. I think that is my point. Yeah. For example, when I when I treat religions as merely social constructed ones, yeah.
Yeah,
So why the believer, yeah, tend to maintain their belief like, okay, they have seen the afterlife things, yeah. We know that, Richard Swinburne has said that knowing or the true belief presuppose the way we construct the morality, I think, yeah. And the way we know the world, okay, just to okay to give such an actions the predicate of morality, for example, yeah, it derived from the way we observe the world, for example. But how can the world of the religions possibly maintain the believers itself? Why? Because, okay, we know that the community of religions or the religion itself coexists with the progressive development of the science, for example. Yeah.
yeah,
I think science have proposal about the truth of the world, and same as religion does, I think. Yeah, religions also propose or provide the knowledge or the things that can be maintained of from the believers, that okay, the world works, or the mechanism of the words like this and like that and so forth. Yeah, regarding the sacred text, for example. But how can we maintain the belief, yeah, that coexists with another belief, for example, scientific belief and so on? I think
Mm.
that is my question.
Oh, I don't know, man. That's too hard of a question. You can only ask me easy questions given the amount of time we have left. Swinburne is famous because he thinks that you can rationally demonstrate that God does exist, at least that it's probable that God exists, and you can use very scientific evidence for that. I think you're right that I am a naturalist in the sense that I was trained in those questions and I'm fascinated by those questions, but they're not the questions that I want to add to the philosophy of religion. I want to add naturalistic questions about what is virtue, what is a group, what is a religion, what's a tradition. These are going to be questions that can set aside the supernatural so that atheists and theists can collaborate on them and make progress on understanding our world. But I'm closer to you, I think, and to theists because, like the examples I've given, the university is not, this connects to your question about abstract realities. The university is not a concrete object, and a religion is not a concrete object, and a marriage is not a concrete object, but I think they're still real. So in my naturalism, I have invisible realities operating, and they have to do with relationships between people.
Okay. Do you want to give your response, Dr. Rodinal, or?
Okay, I think brief response, yeah.
Okay.
Kevin, do you agree with John's proposal that, okay, the divisions between, the distinguish between institutional fact and brute fact? Our religions belongs to institutional fact. What do you think?
Yes,
Or
yes,
it is close to brute fact?
yes, that's my view too.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
Mm.
Okay. Thank you for such a stimulating discussion, Professor and Dr. Rodinal. So before I open the Q&A session for the audience, I also have a question for both of you. It's more like an application, yeah, for both of you, considering so Indonesia's religious plurality and also the common interfaith conflicts in Indonesia. How do both of your approaches help us understand the coexistence and interaction of different faith communities? I ask this because I recently read Professor Schilbrack's article titled Hospitality and the Ethics of Religious Diversity, and I believe it could provide guidance on how we in Indonesia can address, this religious conflict and interfaith conflicts in our country. Thank you. Yeah, please.
Rodi, do you want to answer that one as well?
Yes, both of you.
Well, I'll just say something quick, and I love this question because as I ended my talk, I said that I wanted philosophy to help people with contemporary struggles and not become simply the kind of a book learning where you go to a library and you learn what ancient people said and you try to wrap your mind around the strange ideas that they've had. And so I appreciate this question. I do think that hospitality is a good virtue for how people in one religion or one religious community can deal with those who are living their lives on other paths. It has its limits, though, and there would be times where I think those within one religion will evaluate or critique or disagree with those in other religions. And to be honest, I worry about my own country, and probably the people in this group have heard about the assassination that happened last week, and there was an assassination of a government official about a month ago, and there's a lack of willingness to sit down together and to talk together and to try to find a solution that is a compromise between the two sides. And so an increase of hospitality or an increase of engagement with those with whom we disagree instead of violence would be welcome.
Thank you. Dr. Rodinal, do you want to answer this question?
Which question? Sorry.
Oh, my
About-
question about
Yes. Okay.
how your view can help us understand the coexistence and interaction of different faith communities in Indonesia, because in Indonesia we know that there are many interfaith conflicts.
Okay, I think this is the fact of Indonesian community, religious community, that there are a lot of silence phenomenon. Yeah. Okay, I want to provoke you. Yeah. This forum exactly. Yeah. The way religions being spread in Indonesia very problematic because we are a post-colonial country. Yeah. We face a lot of injustice. Yeah, epistemic injustice, testimonial injustice, but current injustice close to or dominated by hermeneutical injustice. I think so many indigenous religions hard to find the exact way or exact things that really match with their belief in the national scope narrations that legalized and officially handled by religions or sorry by country, by the state. Yeah, I think very hard to imagine how the ideal interactions or interfaith dialogue in the Indonesia context, because we have to be clear about why so many indigenous religions being silenced throughout the history, yeah, and why the states only tend to promote one kind of religious tendencies. For example, only Abrahamic or monotheistic traditions. It is a match or similar example with the Hinduism in Indonesia. They being recognized. They are recognized as the official or as the legal religions in Indonesia since 1950s. Before that, they are asked or forced to give or provide the prophet of their self. I think they doesn't have the prophet, the notion of the prophet, yeah, like you found in Abrahamic religions. They don't have once or only one's sacred text, yeah, they have a lot of sacred texts, but the state require or ask them to provide only one sacred text, like what you found in Abrahamic religion. I think that is very hard to imagine how the interfaith dialogue in Indonesia, because the sectarianism still arise. Professor Kevin, in Indonesia, sometimes you have to visit Indonesia, and I will show you the reality of the religious community in Indonesia. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the answer, Professor and Dr. Rodinal. So now it's time for our Q&A session. So please, Mr. Fakhri, you can open your mic and ask your question. And after that, Mr. Apriyadi also can use your mic. Okay. Yeah, Mr. Fakhri, please unmute yourself.
Okay. Are my voice clear?
Yes, it's clear.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so thank you, Professor Kevin, for your presentation. I remember when you explain or give an example, like religion is like a two-person holding a commitment in marital relationship, and
Yes.
that resembles Thomas Swift proposal about religion, which is religion is a
Yeah.
relational thing that interact and dialect a lot of things. I also remember Amina Alatas Bradford who reconnect and relate theology, anthropology, and microbe in this case. So if we try to define religion, we should also consider a lot of things to define it. Maybe I want to focus on your proposal regarding critical realism. After assessing, if I'm not wrong, three conceptual critiques of religion, there are two position stands, at least abolitionist stance and retentionist stance. Correct me if I'm wrong. That is your stance. That acknowledge the problem but advocate somehow critical realist stance. How the concept religion, while using it reflexively and critically in the light of history and ideological baggage. So
Yeah.
religion may be understood as a pattern of, you say, anatomy of religion, including ethics, ritual, and
Yeah.
politics.
Mm.
But so you reject the claim that religion doesn't exist. Maybe you
Mhm.
acknowledge that the term is problematic, but insist that it remains analytically useful, especially for us who engage in the discourse of philosophy of religion. Maybe this is my question because I admittedly use your book and your article in my class. I teach philosophy of religion in bachelor student. Uh, s- Maybe the first question regarding how can philosophy of religion avoid epistemic bias when attempting to embrace non-Western traditions, such as Vedanta, Buddhism, Shia tradition, indigenous religions. Is it possible to develop a truly global philosophy of religion without falling into relativism, or maybe we could say pseudo universalism? That's my
Mm.
first question. So maybe the second question also for Kevin regarding to religious ethics. Can ethical reasoning within the religious tradition be critically analyzed and assessed without clarifying religion as a coherent and bounded entity? Because, your proposal tend to recap and accommodate a lot of tradition. So should ethical validity be measured by universal philosophical standards like maybe Kantian deontological ethics, Aristotelian virtue ethics, utilitarian ethics, or by the internal norms of particular religious communities? Maybe that's my question. Thank you, Kevin Schilbrack.
Thank you, Dr. Afif. What your summary of my view in the book was exactly correct. And so again, I'm touched by how carefully uh, Indonesian thinkers are reading my book and responding to my book. Yeah, your first question had to do with a universal concept or definition of religion and how to apply it to the Vedanta and all the other examples you gave. Um, I still agree with what I said in the book, although the chapter that you're mentioning is the one that I have developed the most after the publication of the book. And uh, uh, Dr. Rodi was right when he said, I don't have an essence to religion. I don't have an essentialist view of religion. And I think I was still too limited in the account of religion that I gave in the book. And it can make the fit between the concept of religion and the actual practices of some particular group not a very good fit. And so what I've shifted to since I wrote the book is what people call a family resemblance concept of religion. So that, just to summarize, you could say, well, there's 5 traits or properties that you usually, typically, paradigmatically find with religions. And there are groups that have all 5 of those, and nobody really disagrees whether those are religions. But there's some that only have 4. And when they have 4, you start to say, well, that's strange. That's an unusual case, but it's probably still a religion. But some only have 3. And if they only have 3, then they're kind of on the bubble. If you have a family resemblance definition of religion, then you have a gray area where you say it's similar to religions and it's unlike religions at the very same time. But I think lots of our concepts work like this. I have my best friends, and then I have some kind of friends, and then I have some people I like, but they're not really friends. And then I have, acquaintances. Like, I think our concepts often are fuzzy or vague in this way, in this family resemblance way. And I now put religion in that category, so that I would say religion is a more flexible concept than the way I describe in the book. And one place, I put my email in your chat if people want to receive these publications from me, but also you can look up my name in the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, which is online. And I have an entry there called The Concept of Religion that talks about religion as a family resemblance. And I hope that's helpful. Your second question, to be honest, about ethics and about ethical criteria and how to judge those is even more difficult, I think, and I'm even less sure of the right answer. I don't say that we should all adopt Kant's ethics, or that we should all adopt utilitarianism or some other particular ethical scheme and then go around the world. Thank you for posting that. That we should go around the world judging people's religions. I mean, this goes back to Jessica's question about religious diversity or plurality. I don't think we should just say, well, all the religions are equally good, all the religions are equally true. I think human animals are judgmental creatures, and they do need some criteria to say, but I don't accept this. I'm struck by an introduction to a book, and it was called City of Sacrifice, I think. City of Bones, maybe. No, City of Sacrifice. And it's by a scholar of religion who went into a pyramid in Mexico, and they were showing him the bones of the people who had been sacrificed there. And he said, why are the bones so small? And they said, well, because they were killing children. And he thought, my training as a scholar of religion tells me I should not be judgmental, but I'm also a parent, and my body is saying, my guts are telling me, I don't want to say it's okay to sacrifice children in your religious rituals. And so as a philosopher who includes ethics in my areas, I want to begin a conversation so that people can include ethical evaluation, not only of war or of murder, but also of the actions that people do in the name of religion, and that they would draw a line and say, but this is cruel or lacking in virtue or hateful or something like that. But I don't have I'm still working on what ethical scheme I would recommend as the best. And it would not be Kant or utilitarianism. It would probably be something closer to Aristotle.
Okay, such an interesting answer from Professor Schilbrack. Now we will go to the next question from Mr. Apriyadi. Please unmute yourself. Okay, host, can you help Mr. Apriyadi to unmute?
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, good.
Okay. So thank you. I think my question is for Kevin. I have not read your book. I'm sorry, but the way you
You
present
should
your
be
book,
ashamed of yourself.
but the way you present your book, I think is super interesting. I love your story about the kid and his mother. the kid tells mother, "Mom, the philosopher create arguments to prove the existence of God," and the mother reply, "That's nice." Okay,
Yeah.
so yeah, I definitely need to read your book. Obviously, I think my question has something to do with what you called earlier as the secret of philosophy of religion, if I'm not mistaken. That is how philosophers still disagree on the definition of religion.
Yeah.
So some people say that religion has something to do with supernatural being like God, Allah, Vishnu, you name it.
Yeah.
But some people here in Indonesia say that Buddhism is a religion. That's funny
Yeah.
because some Buddhists actually don't believe in God. So
Yeah.
I think my question would be if you had to define religion,
Yeah.
how would you define it? That is my first question. And my
Yeah.
second question is, you said that you are a naturalist and you believe in non-concrete things. By the
Yeah.
way, I am a naturalist too. I am an ontological naturalist, but I
Yeah.
believe in non-natural moral realism when it comes to the moral question.
That's good.
I am often accused that if someone is a naturalist, they must be a physicalist or materialist, and
That's
that
right.
naturalists cannot believe in abstract things. So
Right. Yeah.
my second question is, how would you respond to that accusation that, yeah,
Hmm.
a naturalist cannot believe in non-physical things? So that's for me.
Well,
Thank you.
that's your question is exactly on target. Um, I think the problem is that naturalists over the past couple hundred years, they were so connected to science that they define naturalism or nature as what the natural sciences tell us. And I call that scientific naturalism. So I put an adjective in front of the word naturalism and I say that's scientific naturalism, but it's not a healthy naturalism for human beings because at the level of physics, at the level of chemistry, at the level of biology, there are no marriages and there is no moral realism and there are and gosh, if they're not just scientific naturalists, but they're physicalists, like you mentioned, they don't even have functions. Like they would disagree if you said, but the heart functions to pump blood. They would say, no, there's no functions because functions are invisible. It does pump blood, but it doesn't have a function or a purpose. And you're trying to bring God back into the picture. I think scientific naturalism is fine, but it's not an acceptable philosophy for people who live with each other. And so if you want to be a naturalist, I put a different adjective in front of naturalism and I talk about expansive naturalism or liberal naturalism or some other kind of bigger naturalism. Um, at the level of physics, chemistry, and biology, there's no hopes or dreams or loves or hates. There's no minds at those levels. And so if we're going to include minds and intentionality and morality and even mathematics, then you have to have a bigger naturalism. I recommend I think it's called the Oxford Handbook to Liberal Naturalism, and that's a good introduction. And it just came out like 2 years ago to that view. And your other question was, what's my definition of religion? I talked about substantive and functional definitions in my presentation, and I try to combine them into a definition that has both. And I also said, as in the Stanford Encyclopedia of article that Rodi put in the chat, I now have a family resemblance or they call it polythetic definition. So I have a polythetic definition of religion that's anchored with something super empirical. And Buddhists, I believe, they do believe in super empirical things. Certainly, if they are Pure Land Buddhists and they say there's a cosmic Buddha who loves us and he has always existed and he has created a heaven or a Pure Land that we go to, our souls go to after our death, like it's hard to deny that that meets the definition of religion. So feel free to, if you read that article and it's not clear, feel free to write me and follow up on your good question. Thank you.
Okay, is there any more question from the audience? Okay, thank you for the questions and responses from our speakers. So before we conclude tonight's session, Professor Schilbrack and Dr. Rodinal, I would like to give you both the opportunity to offer your closing remarks as we come to the end of today's session.
Rodi, is it okay if I go first? And I will be quick.
Okay, it's okay.
I feel like I already got to share a lot of my ideas, and so I don't need further closing remarks, except to say that I'm grateful to be invited to this and to have my ideas taken so seriously, and to hear about people reading my book and thinking about these ideas in Indonesia. And I hope I get an opportunity to do this again. And if I do get an opportunity to do this again, I would like to connect our conversation to Jessica's question about hospitality, ethics, how people treat each other across religious lines. There's isms like Buddhism or Judaism. Those are isms. And there's also secular isms, right? There's communism and capitalism, and there's transhumanism and secular humanism. There's secular isms too that would need to be included in the conversation, because I don't think it's true that the problem of inhospitality or intolerance or violence is just a religious problem. I think there are secular movements or secular isms that are just as likely to promote violence and to be inhospitable and intolerant. And so they ought to be included in the conversation. And I appreciate Jessica connecting this my work in philosophy of religion, which I know can be very abstract, to down to earth problems like how people treat each other. So thank you.
I think that's a good idea, Professor. Okay, so for Dr. Rodinal, do you have?
Okay, for the closing remarks, yeah, I quote Hans Kung wise point, yeah. No peace between religion without interaction and interfaith dialogue, and no interfaith dialogue without the suitable or good understanding between religions. So we have to expand our point of view. We have to understand other religion from their source, yeah, from their own point of view. And okay, we can't only rely on truth claim, merely on truth claim. We have to understand how the other community of religions or other community of religions understand their conception on God and so on. So that is my closing remarks, yeah, for today's meetings, and very, very great honor to be paneled with you, Mr. Kevin, Professor Kevins, and very, very nice to see you. And we hope that this is not our last meeting, yeah. We can continue discussions later. I think if you would to visit Indonesia and to attend, to hold the public lecture at my Faculty of Philosophy, Gadjah Mada University, I think it is a great honor for us. Thank you, Kevin. I will
That would be
send an email later. Thank you.
Okay, and with that, our session tonight comes to a close. Thank you again, Professor Schilbrack and Dr. Rodinal, for your inspiring contribution. We look forward for the next discussion with you. And thank you also to all participants for your enthusiasm, and see you at the next event. Good night, everyone.
Good night. Thank you.